All right, welcome everybody to our March virtual tasting for the Forgotten Grapes Wine Club. We are so excited to have Ryan Roark from the Roark Wine Company here with us. We will get to him in just a second. But of course, before we do, standard reminders, we're going to mute everybody before we kick off the discussion. If you've got any questions for Ryan, any food pairings, any comments, whatever it might be, throw those into the chat. Allison and I will be monitoring those and we'll ask those questions as they come up. Mention those comments when they come up. Gosh, is there anything exciting going on in the next 9 days, Allison? Anything at all happening?
Well, I'm fortunately sleeping at night, so I guess no. We are almost 1 week away from the second annual Festival of Forgotten Grapes. And so I know some of you have gotten your tickets. If you haven't, they're still on sale. They are $69, but $10 off because we love you. You can use PPP10 or
FGWC10 is the
or just email us. But basically, we have 60 wineries this year. That's double what we had last year. We have 257 wines, and are you ready for this? 96 unique grape varieties, and the top 9 are not part of that.
Yes.
Because we don't allow them in the event. So no Pinot, no Chard, no Cab, Syrah, Zin, Petite Syrah, Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Grigio.
Pretty much everything we're drinking here with Ryan tonight, not at the festival. Forgotten.
And that's why it'll be
no
fun
offense to you, Ryan.
And just so you know, Ryan, the Forgotten Grapes is really based on California acreage, not based on anything else, because I've heard from numerous wineries that they feel very strongly that Syrah and Zinfandel are forgotten in many ways. You're going to prove us why they shouldn't be. But, we know that there are grapes that need more love, even though they take up 50, 60, 70,000 acres of plantings in California.
Yep. So yeah, tickets still on sale. VIP tickets are completely sold out, so it's only general admission at this point, but you're going to get 3 full hours of tasting with that for the 60 wineries, the over 250 wines being poured, the close to 250. That's why I'm 250 plus. The close to 100 different unique varietals that are being poured there, including, obviously, we had 75 last year, so we've got 20 plus that were not poured last year that are being poured this year. Which
in fact, there are 2 I bet nobody here's tried: Baccarat and Tourette Noir.
I've had both.
Oh, well,
but it's it's
domestic.
It's my club. It's my brand. So
domestic.
Yeah, it's Topless Creeks. So.
Well, yeah.
I know. There, it's kind of a spoiler. Actually, I have a bottle of the Tourette Noir in my
the Baccarat is their very first one.
Yeah, so, Baccarat is delicious. Perfect. Anyway, you do not want to miss on those varietals. You do not want to miss on the Orinto. I think there's like a dozen different Cinsault pours there, which I'm super, super excited about. So it's gonna be a good time. So we hope to see all of you out there. Because of that, because of the festival and how busy Allison and I are with that, there won't be an April Forgotten Grapes Wine Club winery or shipment. So our next one will be in May. We'll send the email out towards the end of April. So keep an eye out for that, but don't feel aggrieved if you don't see an email in your inbox the next week, because we are skipping April because of all of the wines that we're going to have to cull for folks who are purchasing at the festival. So, okay. With that being said, let's get to tonight's guest, Ryan Roark, a winemaker who I have known for quite a long time. When I launched my wine shop in 2011, I happened to meet Ryan at a wine tasting, and he pitched some of his wines to me. So we actually carried, I believe, your Malbec and your Chenin Blanc back in the day when you were first getting underway at Chris Kern's Forgotten Grapes, which was pretty awesome. So it's been terrific to see his evolution and the wider portfolio that he's got, the different styles of wine that he's making. And Ryan, we always begin by asking, what's the most memorable bottle of wine that you've ever opened?
So I was reviewing those questions earlier today, And
Just earlier today. That's a little late.
yeah, and was just looking up, at in the cellar that I work, I have a bit of a, trophy cap, some old bottles and
Oh yeah.
memorable bottles that serve as inspiration and reference points. And I was kind of looking through them, and I think that the most interesting, memorable, just wine out of that group was a 1979
Hmm.
Sanford and Benedict Cabernet Sauvignon.
Wow.
Wow.
So it kind of fits in this forgotten grapes kind of
Yeah.
ethos
I've
because
never heard of this Cabernet Sauvignon. Tell me more about
you know,
it.
Richard Sanford and Michael Benedict originally planted Sanford and Benedict, at least in part to Cabernet Sauvignon.
Right.
And
Really?
it was only over time, because that was the grape of the grape du jour of that time. That's,
Yeah.
people were planting Cabernet and Chardonnay, and this Santa Rita Hills, not that far from the San Ynez Valley, it didn't seem like a bad play.
Yeah.
But
There was no Pinot Noir competition in the Judgment of Paris. It was just Bordeaux varietals and Chardonnay. So
exactly, so that was what they planted, and it was only over time that they realized that there were other varieties that might be better suited. And I've actually had 1979 Pinot Noir from Sanford and Benedict twice. Um, it's but that was a bottle that I had that bottle with at a dinner with a group of friends. All a couple wine professionals, couple passionate wine consumers, and we all. And this was we drank that bottle 6 years ago. So I mean, it was
oh
still
wow. Yeah.
close to 40 years old, and it was by far the standout wine. At that dinner where, let's say, there were 6 to 8 bottles on the table. We all know a wine country dinner, good food, a handful of bottles, and
I was
and
gonna
that
say
was the one we.
six to eight seems low.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that was the standout. That was the standout amongst everyone, and that was a wine that, just like looking back on it, like there's not that there can't there probably weren't that many of those bottles ever produced. There can't
Right.
be that many of them left,
No.
and and just looking back and thinking about those guys in 1982, 1983, 81, when they would have been wanting to sell that wine, and how tannic and just aggressive that wine would have been to have been delicious 40 years old.
Yeah.
It's just a testament to their vision and a testament to that area, but also like forgotten varieties in these new fangled regions. And so that was a really cool, just to be able to drink a bottle from my region's history like that was a special experience, but it stands out as just an incredible bottle of wine.
That's really amazing, because when they tell the story, whenever they tell the story of the Santa Rita Hills and of Richard Sanford, it's all about how he drove all the way down the coast with his finger out the window, out the VW, looking for that perfect win, and hit the Santa Rita Hills and knew it was the right place for Pinot Noir. And they
No,
seem to neglect this idea that he planted Cabernet.
yeah, no, I mean, that's, like, yeah, I, it, it's not discussed, but it was there, and it was, it's that old school. It's a beautiful label. I don't know if you've ever seen any of the old Sanford labels, but they're very simple, with a beautiful, like, coastal oak tree on them.
Hmm.
And so it's that same old label, but on a Bordeaux bottle. I still have the bottle, and it's right next to a 79 Sanford and Benedict Pinot. And
Who held on to a bottle that long? Whose bottle was it? That's amazing.
What's crazy, I bought it for like $35.
Oh, it was your, oh, wow.
Now, did you get to also taste the 79 Pinot?
Yeah, I've had that wine twice.
Yeah.
So did both age well, or did one age better?
No, both aged really, really well. And, I had them, like I said, I think I drank the Cabernet 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. I had the Pinot. I think I had one of those like a year or two ago, and it was delicious. I mean, they were great, but that cab was just hyper memorable.
Yeah. Well, and a true forgotten grape in that it's a relic, there are no cab vines on that vineyard anymore.
No,
So that's amazing.
I mean, I don't think you can find Cabernet Sauvignon planted in the Santa Rita Hills anymore.
no.
Yeah, that's true. That's back when people thought cool climate cab was fine and a thing.
Because we love our pyrazines.
Exactly. So we're gonna start our tasting tonight with the 2022 Pocket Full of Stones, 70% Sauvignon Blanc, 30% Chardonnay. Ryan, let's talk a little bit as we're tasting through this wine about how you got into winemaking and how you ended up in Santa Barbara on the Central Coast.
Yeah, I think this wine is a great opportunity to kind of frame that conversation, because Pocket Full of Stones is a reference to some of the geology in this area, where we have a lot of geologic evidence of mud flows, bigger stones, systems like sand and clay. Um, and so, when you're driving around Santa Barbara County, in public areas like Ballard Canyon and whatnot, but I think more of like some of the ranch roads that I frequent, when you see it cut away, then that's what you see is like almost like that image on that label of these stones that maybe originated in a river or something, but then got carried and deposited somewhere else.
Mhm.
And so it's like, and my I got interested in wine. My mom's uncle was a geologist, and he was a passionate wine consumer who ultimately kind of in retirement got connected with people in the Napa Valley and did a lot of work, wrote a book, did a documentary, and then did individual geologic analysis of vineyards in the Napa Valley. I
Oh,
mean,
wow.
the we could just sit here and rattle off the top level wineries of the Napa Valley, and he worked with a lot of them. Very modest, just great guy. And when I was in college, I did an exchange program with an agriculture university in France,
Mhm.
and did an internship at a winery over there. And when he found out about that via my mom, he offered to make connections if I ever wanted to come out to California. So I grew up in Northeast Texas. I went to Texas A&M. I was just a country cowboy in France. And next thing I know, I've got opportunity to come out to California. Let's go. And that's what I wanted to do when I got out of college. I wanted to travel. I wanted to see the world. And I very quickly saw the wine industry as an opportunity to do so,
Mhm.
to be able to kind of bounce around a little bit and fund via, working in wineries and internships, be able to fund a few years worth of world travel. And
Was
that's what I
that
did.
Sorry, was that something you were exposed to in college in Texas, or was that something that you kind of the world of wine were exposed to through your grandfather?
I mean,
Uncle.
Uncle, I'm sorry, your uncle.
yeah, the world of wine became just like a spark through the knowledge of my uncle's work.
Okay.
And then me just reading up a little bit, I read stories of winemakers who went and worked a harvest here and went and worked a harvest there. And I still thought it was all a bit, you know, unrealistic until I,
Super.
I threw in my hat at a couple places that my uncle introduced me to, and I got an internship at Etude up in Napa,
Hmm.
Were
and
you studying agriculture? Is that what your studies were?
I was studying, like, my degree is called bioenvironmental sciences, but is basically an undergraduate degree in the Department of Plant Pathology and Microbiology.
Okay.
Okay.
So when I got into the wine business and people started explaining to me the, like the fundamentals of fermentation, it's like, I get it. I understand what they're telling me from a scientific perspective. And it's the same with the farming. Like, you know, um I took soil microbiology, plant pathology, plant physiology. So did I go to Cal Poly? Did I go to Fresno, Davis? None of those places. I did not take specific wine courses, but the courses that I did take were very, very, immediately analogous.
Yeah,
And
really germane to what you wanted to study. I imagine having that scientific background, particularly in soils, geological patterns, really helps with the vineyard side of things, both your vineyard management and then also when you're selecting vineyards for the grapes that you're going to pick.
yeah, exactly.
And you had said that you went on an agricultural exchange program in France. So that was because of the plant studies.
That was
But
just
how did you end up at a winery? Just accidentally?
Well, the program, so I had to have an internship to satisfy the requirements of my degree.
Okay.
And I was gonna do I was signed up to work in a genetics lab at A&M for the summer to get my internship. And one day this email comes across through the study abroad department with this program with optional internships. And the internships were either dairy, horticulture, or vineyard. And I signed up that day and I applied for one of the vineyard ones and I got it. And so it was as simple as, that sounds fun. Let's go to France for the summer and work at a vineyard. That sounds great.
Yeah. But this was, I mean, reading your bio on your website, this was not a big winery or negociant. This was a small little winery, if memory serves.
Yeah, no, it was two brothers in Savenierres, in this like iconic village in the Loire Valley, and like their parents grew up in that village. One of my best memories was their parents, the brothers that I worked for were 10 or 15 years older than me, and their parents, they lived in the village during World War II. And so they had like a I don't know, like a supper club, kind of lunch club, that once a month, all of these people that grew up in that village would meet up at someone's house and have lunch together and then go for a walk. And like, while I was there, we did that, so all of these, people in their 70s and 80s that grew up in this village, and saw, the occupation and all these kinds of things. We all had lunch together and then just walked around town. I mean, it was a charming experience.
And having done lunches in France, I know that that lunch and walk was 9 hours.
Yeah, it was all day long. Had to stop by the lawn bowling.
Oh, gotta play some boule. Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
and see them, and so yeah, it was two brothers. One of them was kind of a little bit more outgoing. He was single. The other brother was married, a bit of a homebody, and so
Were they the
brothers.
Dows? Were they the
What was that?
Dows in disguise?
Huh?
Were they the Dow brothers? No.
Yeah. So one was around kind of managing the vineyard on a day-to-day basis. The other one had his house up in Normandy, and he was kind of selling the wine. And then, they would come and we would meet up. But it was, for me, having no experience in all this, it was an incredible just survey on the wine business. I got to spend time in the vines. We bottled, we racked wine, I labeled a ton of bottles, and just seeing like the brothers argue about whether or not they should filter the wine. And me and brother A are filtering the wine, and he's just cursing brother B the whole time that we shouldn't be doing this. Look, it tastes like shit now that we filtered it. And so like just those themes and that's winemaking. And just that, for me, it was just a great introduction. It was really enjoyable, and in a way, I feel like I was just kind of trying to replicate that experience through my career.
Nice.
But I always think, sorry, Chris, I was just
I
gonna
was
say
just
what
going to ask short, quick
huh?
question about the language barrier. How, you're from Texas. Did you have any French whatsoever? Did they speak English? How did you manage that?
Well, I don't know if you're familiar, if you're aware, but most Texans are fluent in French.
Well, I mean, certain types of French, but not French per se. But I guess that's all you need, right?
No, I mean, luckily they spoke. Both of them spoke. Their parents not so much, but the two of them spoke conversational English,
Okay.
and so, that was part of it. Is yeah, I didn't, and we were able, as much as I wish I would have, learned to speak French in the 2 months that I was there. The reality is like most of the conversations were much more productive in English.
Yeah.
I was going to say what I think is so interesting is that, when you talk, how people get to wine or get to winemaking or wine drinking, whatever it is that sometimes it's the tiniest little opportunity that kind of knocks on your door that if you don't just open the door and go that way, you don't even know this world will even open to you. I think it's just always amazing. It's just that lesson to say, like, always be open to, like, just keep your eyes open and your ears open for those little things that come at your way, because if you can walk through that door,
Yeah. Yeah. What is it? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, basically.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
But I mean, had you not gotten that email and you would have done something in a genetic lab, and you may never have expressed an interest to your uncle, which would never have led you to California. So,
So you finished up in France. Were there other members of your was this strictly for your university, or was this a bigger program? So were there other Americans who were interning with you at the time, or?
There was so it was a 1 month program at this agriculture university that was basically just kind of a 1 month immersion into French culture and the economy in that area, the agricultural economy of that area.
Okay.
And so that there were students from about 5 universities, about 30 of us total. And then there were I think 3 or 4 of us, 5 of us maybe, that stuck around and did the internships. But then once we did the internships, like we're all spread out.
Right.
And so there was like one time we all met back up, but yeah, it was basically just me living with these octogenarian French people in their beautiful farmhouse with a garden
In
and
the Loire Valley. Yeah.
in the Loire Valley. We'd have big lunches every day. I'd take a nap and then go back to work. Classic.
Yes, you got your 22 hours in a week. You worked
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
and I'm sure you've really imposed that same lifestyle in your current world.
Yeah, I try. It's a little bit harder with the modern American responsibilities to execute it all within a 20-hour work week. I
The
try.
McDonald's, yeah, the McDonald's mayonnaise is very different than the homemade mayonnaise that they have
Yes.
over there. Exactly. So you left France and then graduated and then got to work at Etude. You ended up with a position at Etude in Napa.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, and then how did you make your way back down to the Central Coast?
So yeah, I went and worked 6 months at Etude, like kind of a hybrid viticulture winemaking internship, which was incredible. I got to see vineyards from Carneros all the way to Calistoga, and then finish out with the late harvest winemaking and into December bottling. And then went back home, spent a little time visiting family and friends, and then I went and worked in New Zealand. Went and worked, just bummed around there for a bit. Picked apples for like a month, and then worked at a winery down there for a couple months, and then I came to Santa Barbara County. So I was in New Zealand, doing that whole thing like, I got to get a job. This job's about to be done. I only have so much runway. I need another job. And so once again, just reaching out to all the contacts, all the, applying to jobs online, all the things. And I got offered a job in Sonoma. I didn't want to go back to Napa, not because Napa was bad, but I just wanted something different. So I got offered a job in Sonoma and then in Santa Barbara County. And I came and I went to work in Santa Barbara County at Arcadian Winery. Worked for them for 2 years, basically 2 harvests. And then I went to work for a vineyard management company, and I worked for them for 2 seasons. That was great. Every week I would visit 50 vineyards and write reports on how things are going. So I just, you know, I can walk into a vineyard very quickly and I can see if the work's been done or if it's not been done. So as a great buyer, a lot of times in my current role and in my current occupation, I'm a grape buyer. And so I can walk into a vineyard almost any time during the growing season or dormancy, and I can know if a farmer is putting in the inputs. And that's one thing that I feel like a skill that I have, that I've developed, that is unique to my experience. Not that no one else has had that experience, but it is something that I feel strong on.
It's your portfolio that you've developed over time.
Yeah, I've logged. I worked for 2 years, 50 hours a week with an ATV in the back of a truck, driving around up and down vineyard rows in vineyards farmed at commodity levels, all the way to the highest end farming that you can imagine, and writing reports. And so I know where the law of diminishing returns is. I know where baseline. Yeah, and that was really, really valuable. And then after that, I worked for Andrew Murray for a couple years.
Mhm.
That's kind of the time when I was working at the Vineyard Management Company, and when I was working for Andrew Murray was when I started making a little bit of wine for myself.
Okay.
And I was dating my wife at the time, but we were not married. And instead of renting an apartment or anything like that, I rented warehouses. So I had one in Lompoc for 2 years, and then I had one in Buellton that we were in for almost 10 years. So I'd lease these warehouses, and we lived in the warehouses for 4 years.
Yeah.
So it was just I wanted to be able to do my work without compromise, without having to worry about, doing it in somebody else's cellar. And so those were the compromises and the kind of the concessions that we made to be able to do that.
It's very like grindcore startup hustle mode.
Yeah,
So,
but it was fun.
I know someone who does that still in Buellton area.
Yeah, no, my buddy Scott Sampler.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's nothing better than when I go, because I cover him also for the Slow Wine Guide, and we're friends. Anyway, every time I come over and I'm like, I know, you can't talk to Scotty for less than 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I come over and he's like, let's go have Negronis. Come on in the back. He makes the Negronis, feeds the dog,
Yeah.
Stirs the wine, pulls a barrel sample.
No, I mean, when you're like at a certain point, like for me, it was like, why am I going to spend X amount of dollars to go rent an apartment when I leased my place in Buellton, it was like $1,200 or $1,400 for like 2,000 square feet. I could do whatever I want. I can pull my truck in, and it was great. And
as long as it's got a shower or you've got a gym membership, you're good.
Yeah,
so.
The floor drain is
just with the hose.
And you knew that your wife would be your wife, because the keeper is one who is willing to do it with you.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so that was, and then in 2013, I left working for Andrew, and because I'd kind of landed a client I'd leveraged the space that I had to land a client to make some wine for, and that replaced the salary that I was earning.
Nice. So I want to circle back and
so
about...
up until, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I think you were cutting in and out there, so I thought you were done.
No,
but you go ahead and finish your thought.
Yeah, but no. So that's after that, farming, leasing vineyards, making wine. That's what I did for 10 plus years. Now, I manage the vineyard and make the wine at Demetria, and continue, to make wines for myself and make more kind of classical, traditional, the estate wines for Demetria. And RO-ark Wine Company continues to be just my creative outlet where I can make whatever I want, do whatever I want, and you know, at the end of the day, just make the wines I want to drink.
Yes. And thank you for properly pronouncing your last name, because I, for years, have said Roark, but it's clearly Roark. So we will
It's all
go
good.
with
And with Demetria, because I know you farm biodynamically there, your practices of farming, with the vineyards that you source from for Roark, is that, do you farm all of them, or are you buying from some? And do you require them to also have the same farming philosophy that you have?
So with the Roark wines, like the Syrah that we'll taste, that's a vineyard that I've been farming for 10 years. And you know, while I don't necessarily practice, like I don't do the biodynamic preps out there, but a lot of the same holistic mindset and organics, those apply. When I'm buying grapes, as much as I can, I'm buying them from people that I feel like are doing a good job. And that's that's a whole nother conversation in itself. And at the end of the day, like we have friends that maybe we do or do not necessarily agree with all of their lifestyle choices, but they're still maybe good friends. And it's the same with farming. I buy grapes from growers that maybe have a beautiful old vineyard that makes like delicious grapes that translate into hyper expressive wines, but we may not be aligned 100% on how they farm it. But I think sometimes those other things trump the farming. And so I'm willing to make those concessions sometimes. And then hopefully, but like there are certain things like I don't want to work with vineyards that are using herbicides. I prefer if they're not using, if they're using the softest fungicides that they can. But like I said, every situation's different, and I'm not very dogmatic, but the way I farm the vineyards that I farm, it's organic with a holistic kind of, approach to nutrition. Demetria is biodynamic. None of the wines that we're tasting today are from grapes that I got from Demetria, but that's, I definitely get grapes from Demetria every other year or so. So
yeah, it's the classic, the quality of the grapes trumps the or supersedes the farming techniques at times. So how did you decide on the vineyards for this particular wine and this particular blend? Because Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay is not a combo you see very often. It's Bordeaux and Burgundy together for the first time, or the Loire and Burgundy together for the first time.
yeah, well, I love Sauvignon Blanc and I love Chardonnay. They both make, those are two of the great whites of Santa Barbara County. And there's a region in the Loire called Cheverny. And that was kind of my inspiration, is let's play with it, and I made my first pocket full of stones in 2018, and it was Chenin Blanc, Chardonnay, and Grenache Blanc. And it was it was some leftover scrap, kind of, barrel of this, barrel of that I had left over. And I liked the way it tasted. And then I decided in 2022, because I had Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc, I was like, I want a little bit more thoughtful version of the pocket full of stones. So the current pocket full of stones is a blend of Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc, which it will remain that.
Okay.
The Chardonnay comes from a vineyard in the Santa Maria Valley called North Canyon, which once again, it kind of falls into that category of, it's a big, huge vineyard.
Yes,
it used to be owned. Yeah, it used to be owned by Treasury Wine Estates.
Yeah, a lot of unusual grapes there, if memory serves.
Yeah, but old Wente clone Chardonnay sandy soil. I mean, it's classic. Um, and then the Sauvignon Blanc for the Pocket Full of Stones is the same Sauvignon Blanc that's in the Sauvignon Blanc.
Okay.
And that's from a vineyard that I started working with in 2022 for Demetria and myself. Then it's over in San Ynez at the corners of Robles and Edison Street. And it's a gentleman from Orange County who retired up in the San Ynez Valley, built a beautiful home, planted this vineyard, and it's just, yeah, it's a great Sauvignon Blanc vineyard.
Is you farm this vineyard?
I don't farm that vineyard, no.
Oh, no. Okay. And is this blend always dominant on Sauvignon Blanc, or what's sort of the reasoning in your percentages?
So for this particular one, the 2022, 2023 was really similar. It's like I start with the Sauvignon Blanc and then I just add in the Chardonnay until it kind of gets to where I want it to be. And where the Sauvignon Blanc can be a little bit more mineral, the Chardonnay can provide a little bit more texture and kind of that creamy, nutty, kind of riper Chardonnay character. And so I think when I blended this wine, I started at like 50-50 and then did one that was 60-40, 70-30, 80-20, and then just taste them and make a choice.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, it's a fun wine because it doesn't fall on either side of them, even though it's 70-30.
Yeah.
There's a little bit more acidity from the Sauvignon Blanc, but flavor wise, to me, it's got a little more roundness, a little more apple fruit to it, even with its dryness, and especially on the nose, there's almost a kind of stone fruit nose to it, which is really unique.
Yeah, I want people to think, like,
Yeah.
pour somebody a glass of this. What is it? And hopefully at the end of the day, it's just an enjoyable, crisp, clean white wine.
Yeah.
But maybe it makes you contemplate.
Well, what it does for me is it puts a Natasha Bedingfield song immediately in my head that I can't get out. So, Pocket Full of Sunshine is the, yes, exactly. But
I mean, I think to your point, Ryan, I think that's kind of interesting because when you smell it, if you were going to blind taste or something, you wouldn't know what it is. And you might lean towards the Chenin or Chardonnay only because of the richer note than you would think for Sauvignon Blanc, but it is the stone fruit and the acidity that kind of goes, oh, wait a minute, this isn't what I was thinking. So it is really a wine that is kind of fun because every time you smell it or taste it, you get something different. And
yeah.
One of our members, I won't mention who, but he asked about the tartrates in the bottle. He wanted to know if that was typically something that you see. Is it a non-filtering thing? Would it have to do with the temperature of his refrigerator? But yeah, I did notice on the bottom of the cork there were definitely some tartrate crystals on there.
Yeah, and I noticed the bottle that I opened, it almost had like a little ring of tartrates right at where the glass meets the cork. And so I don't cold stabilize or filter my wines. And so, I've found over the years that minimal tartrates develop, but these bottles, they're stored neck down, and they do develop a little bit of tartrates right there. Not all my white wines, but it's not uncommon for them to get a little bit of tartrates right there at that union of the cork and the glass.
And if you're concerned, it just gives you a little chewiness in your wine, a little extra food to.
They're called wine diamonds for a reason. So, acknowledge the beauty of them.
Yeah, a little dental exfoliation.
There you go. Yeah.
I mean, you might want to pair this with something else, but tartrates will help.
No, and speaking of pairings, we always ask our winemakers what food you would pair with your individual wines. So what are some pairings that you normally recommend with the Pocket Full of Stones, Ryan?
I mean, Pocket Full of Stones, this wine, this this summer we were eating a lot this salmon dish where we would take shallots and like cherry tomatoes and slice up those shallots and then put the cherry tomatoes in like a roasting pan, put them in the oven for like a half an hour or so,
Mm.
and then take it out and lay some salmon. Move the tomatoes out of the way, and
Yeah.
then just lay some salmon down in that oil and put that in. And that wine with that meal, just super simple. It's just olive oil, shallots, tomatoes, and salmon. Get you some good salmon from wherever, and that that acidity, with the fish, but then also the tomato, kind of the tartness and the acidity of the tomato with the roundness of the wine. It's delicious.
When
Yeah.
you say, so you put the tomatoes and shallots and olive oil in a pan in the oven,
For
and
like half an hour.
then you put the salmon on and cook the salmon in that same contain, or you take the tomatoes out to cook.
No,
No, you just kind of move them to the side, it sounds like, and then put the salmon,
yeah,
but you've got that sort of tomato juice, olive oil,
Yeah.
shallot.
you wanna you wanna cook the tomatoes until they start popping.
Ah.
Until about
And
eight
then-
You're not halving them, you're doing whole cherry tomatoes.
whole little, just like marble
Yeah.
tomatoes.
And then put the salmon in at that point and cook it for 7 minutes or whatever.
Yeah, 10 minutes, whatever it takes, depending on how thick it is. It's at like 350, whatever, it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
so it's all very simple, basic ingredients. You cook that and then have like a salad or maybe a rice dish, whatever you're into. And that wine right there all day long.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned rice because I could see this with kind of like a nuttier, like Middle Eastern style rice or a wild rice. I think would be delicious with it. The other thing that immediately sprung to mind is given its high acidity, I would love to see this with just like crudité, like
Yeah.
raw vegetables, kind of a soft dip, even like a pita and hummus, or a hummus with the crudité. I think the earthiness, the richness, that little bitter note from the tahini of the hummus would go well because this is so bright but tart, with a lot of citrus fruit on it. I think that would be a delicious pairing with this.
I'm really fascinated
Totally.
by what you were saying, how, because it makes sense that the kind of fattiness of the fish with the acidity of the wine.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting to hear that the acidity of the tomatoes would actually work with the roundness and not fight with the acidity. I mean, I don't think it would. It sounds like a delicious pairing, but it's just interesting because you wouldn't always think tomatoes would go with
Yeah.
acidity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that roasting definitely helps. It adds that kind of like earthier note to it and softens the acidity a little bit. But
I might just try your recipe.
yeah,
Yeah, you should.
so I think everybody should, and send us photos and let us know what you think. Perfect. So now let's move on to the bigger half of that wine, the 2022 White Barn Vineyard Sauvignon Blanc. So you kind of mentioned at the corner of Robles and was it Elliott Street or Elliott Road?
It's Baseline and Robles. I said Edison earlier, but I was
Edison, sorry,
yeah.
yeah, and it was an E. Yeah, got it. So but yeah, getting if my geography is correct, we're getting we're outside of Ballard Canyon, we're getting closer to like Happy Canyon, kind of the warmer part of the Santa Barbara, San Ynez Valley region.
But we're not in Happy Canyon.
No, not yet. We're just
yet.
like on the border.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Yeah, so again, it's funny, you do the full Sauvignon Blanc. You mentioned you lead with a Sauvignon Blanc for the Pocket Full of Stones. Is there something about Sauvignon Blanc? Is that a grape that you've always identified with? I mean, I know you started the brand with Chenin Blanc. So how did you kind of transfer over to Sauvignon Blanc, and what is it about San Ynez? Because I know there are Sauvignon Blancs produced there, but it's not necessarily one of the first grapes I think of when I think of Santa Barbara County, San Ynez area.
Sauvignon Blanc grows really well in basically 101 East.
Mhm.
I don't know of anybody that's got Sauvignon Blanc in the Santa Rita Hills right now.
Yeah.
It would probably do fine there. It would probably be a little green. But Sauvignon Blanc's relatively adaptable to where it's growing. And I've bounced around over the years buying grapes, farming grapes, and in 2022 I came across this vineyard that's, organically farmed. The owner is a great guy, and the guy that he has as his, day-to-day manager is super sharp, just top level grape farmer. And so that's kind of how I started working with this one. But I've been making Sauvignon Blanc off and on since 2013.
Mhm.
I like the way it tastes. I like the style of wine. A lot of Sauvignon Blanc, when you think of that like New Zealand style or kind of big brand Sancerre, it's a lot of, stainless steel tank fermentations, hyper reductive winemaking, trying to, um, eke out those tropical characters.
Right.
I don't want anything to do with that. I ferment my Sauvignon Blanc and age it in barrel.
Hmm.
So it's, if you were to look at like the typical, Burgundian style of white winemaking, that's how I make it. Maybe we'll foot the fruit up a little bit, press it, then into barrel for fermentation, barrel for aging, rack it once, in the spring or summer, rack it again to bottle it. That's it. This wine, what's kind of unique about this one, I started playing around when I took over the cellar at Demetria. We had some acacia barrels, and
Mhm.
I was a little skeptical of them at first. But after a year of, fermenting a few different wines in neutral oak and neutral acacia, I found that I like the acacia. And so in 2022, I bought some of those barrels for myself. And so this wine is 25% new acacia. Um, or no, it's less than that. I had one new acacia barrel, and I
Okay.
split the volume of that barrel in the Pocket Full of Stones and in the Sauvignon Blanc because it was
Got it. So it's
Sauvignon.
like 12%.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Gotcha.
So it's and that gives it a little bit of tannin, a little bit of oak, kind of oakish influence. The in my experience, the acacia um kind of retains and amplifies floral and delicate aromatics really well.
Hmm.
And that's what I like about it. And it gives it just a kiss of that wood um wood originating tannin.
Okay.
And where I think personally, my personal preference, if I were to have a Sauvignon Blanc with 10-20% new oak on it, I don't know if I would love that. But the acacia gives that character, but in a controlled um, context.
Got it. Does for those who aren't as familiar with acacia, because it's one of those things that has kind of been slow to catch on. There are a few wineries that are working with it, but it's not reached mass status yet. But what in terms of tannin, you mentioned the florals on the nose, kind of more the delicate florals, but in terms of tannin, does it provide more tannin, less tannin than oak? What could people be looking for if they see a wine that's aged in acacia?
The the grain, the wood on the acacia is tighter.
Okay.
I could be wrong on this. Please don't hold me to it, but I
You're
believe
you're
that.
the you're the winemaker. I've
Yeah.
never worked with acacia, so we're relying on you
I
for this.
I feel like that it's a little less oxygen transmission,
Okay.
so it's a little bit more reductive. And where when you taste wine out of a new oak barrel, the tannins can kind of be like almost like sandpaper to like just something coarse, like suede leather.
Hmm.
Imagine, running your tongue over suede leather or sandpaper or something like that. You can almost feel the texture with the acacia, it's much less, it's much more subtle. You know, imagine like a much more fine grit sandpaper,
Yes.
or smooth leather versus suede. That's my experience.
Next time I see my dominatrix, I'll have her use a finer grain of sandpaper for me to run my tongue over,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
we'll get the difference there. So
You can the experience can go longer that way if it's less abrasive.
no, I'm paying for it either way. You know, the hour is the hour, doesn't matter. But no, that's interesting. And yeah, I mean, I have only seen acacia wood, acacia heads on the barrels used for white wines, and I suspect because of that tighter grain, it's not something that's common on reds.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's something, that I've kind of slowly learned, when you're buying barrels, if you're only using those barrels as a percentage of your wine, then you kind of want to buy the barrels that are a little bit louder,
Sure.
get a little bit more bang for your buck. Then you can decide how much of it you want to put into whatever particular blend.
Yeah.
Um, and that's kind of the paradigm that I buy barrels at Demetria with, is like, I'm gonna get my bang for my buck.
Right.
For me, it's with the Roark wines, it's like I wanted the acacia barrels in my cellar, and so I knew I had to start buying them because you can't buy them used. And so
Mhm.
let's buy them, and then feather them, kind of spread them out so that the impact is absorbed by a couple different wines.
Yeah, yeah. And I imagine it's been a learning experience for you every year, seeing how much of a diminishment you have of those flavor characteristics of those tannins from the acacia. And it's going back to your scientific background, probably a fun little experiment for you.
Yeah, totally.
Nice. Interesting. Um, cool. Yeah, this no, it's a delicious Sauvignon Blanc, and just um I, since you have made wine in the Loire Valley and you were in Savenierres, so I imagine working primarily with Chenin there. But you were in New Zealand, I imagine working predominantly with Sauvignon Blanc there. And then in Napa with Etude, probably some Sauv Blanc there as well. Have you found that one of those regions sort of influences your winemaking style more than others, or do you take components from the different places where you've worked for each wine, or how does that work?
I mean, when I was in New Zealand, I was still super green,
Right.
just getting involved. But I remember one day I went tasting at a winery down there called Clos Henri, and
What region were you in New Zealand?
well, I worked in Central Otago,
Mhm.
Okay, so
but
more Pinot land.
yeah, I flew into Auckland and I spent a month bumming around the North Island, and then, traveled all over the South Island. And so in the capacity of just a curious you know, wine pilgrim, I stopped in one day at this winery in Marlborough called Clos Henri. I had no idea like the global context of this particular winery, but it was the New Zealand outpost of a Sancerre family.
Oh,
And so they had, their typical New Zealand style wine, but then they also had wines that they made that were more of an homage to their Sancerre roots. And
mhm.
I just remember like, wow, this is really interesting. This is cool. Same grape, but like these two different cultures and these two different, philosophies of winemaking. And that's just something I remember and something that I kind of latched onto. And then over the years, just like I started my brand making Chenin Blanc because that's where I'd worked in France, and I got access to cheap grapes because I was working for the Vineyard management company.
Right.
Um, and but then over the last few years, like there's a producer in the Loire. He actually passed away 1 or 2 years ago, but his name was Jackie Blot, Jacky, and then last name Blot.
Mhm.
And he was a producer in the Loire that was known to make Sauvignon Blanc, or mostly Chenin actually, but in the style of Burgundy.
Hmm.
So making his wine, the guys that I worked for in Sauvignon, they didn't even have one barrel. They
Yeah.
made all their wines in tank. And so this was a guy who had experience in Burgundy and made wine in the Loire Valley, but with Burgundian techniques. And so my journey has been, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay producers, and making my wine in my own cellar without temperature control, without stainless tanks, and all those things. That's what I had to do. Is I had to ferment in barrels because barrels were what I could afford.
Right.
And so that's kind of been like my evolution into it. And so that's what I found is, just about any white grape, you make it like this, it can be pretty damn delicious, but if you're gonna let the wines go through ML and you're not gonna filter them, then you need to harvest at a little bit lower level of ripeness to have the natural acidity that once it's gone through ML, you still have, the crisp characters.
Right.
So it's just, a lot of my winemaking um has been a result of it's like the winemaking by the absence of equipment.
Yes, you're basically just doing an MVP, like a startup, like a minimum viable product,
Yeah,
basically. But
exactly.
you're learning from that, and every stage you're evolving, and every year you're doing new things. Are there any, before we move on, are there any, you know, pieces of equipment, barrels? Are there any things that you're sort of coveting or would like to work with? I mean, uh, amphora, concrete, like, you name it. What are you interested in exploring?
I'm interested. I've been really fortunate out at Demetria. I get to work with concrete. I'm not super interested in the amphora.
Mhm.
Um, One, they scare the hell out of me. They're so goddamn fragile
Right.
and oxidative. What I'm interested in is there's a few of these companies that make wine vessels that are either ceramic or sandstone. So they have that similar, like for fermentation, they draw heat out like concrete does,
Right.
and are great for storage of wine because of moderating temperature. But at the same time, they're closer on the spectrum of porosity to
Right.
stainless than they are to something like terracotta, which are what the amphora are made out of.
Right. Right. That's interesting because I would think sandstone would be super porous as opposed to
I think
ceramic, which would be, very firm because it's kiln fired.
exactly, and I think the sandstone, the kiln fired ceramic is like almost like stainless.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but as I said, it's the temperature moderating
Right.
capabilities of that heat sink. And the sandstone, I think that from wherever it's either, I don't think that they're like carving, like turning these things out of like sandstone,
It's not what the Egyptians used to make,
no, no.
pyramid
But I but
stones.
um but at least the way they're marketed, they're higher on that spectrum.
Got it.
So I don't know if it's a particularly sourced sandstone product or if it's like a micro, like a plywood
Yeah.
kind of, if it's a manufactured kind of thing.
Right. Interesting. So,
Yeah.
what food pairings would you pair with this? How do you think, from a pairing standpoint, this differentiates from the bucket full of stones?
And also on that note of the differentiation, just out of curiosity, why you chose to taste this one second. I mean, having tasted them both, I think they're both textured and the acidity and one doesn't overpower, but
She's
as was
still
messaged,
angry you didn't go with her choice to go
no,
with the
no, no,
Sauvignon
no. I got a message from people who will not be named on this chat, a private message, just curious and confused why, because they had said that when they tasted the Sauvignon Blanc on its end, they saw the influence of the Chardonnay more when they tasted Stoneful of Pocket. So I was just curious what the thought is in that. I'm
Yeah,
not outing you guys.
no, I,
She's just
when I
telling you
was,
you did it wrong, Ryan, is what she's
yeah,
saying.
no, I know.
No,
I'm kidding.
Um, right now I'm trying to hide my hurt feelings.
So thank you everybody for joining us for this abridged version
No.
of the Forgotten Grapes Wine
Fine,
Club.
you guys got me in trouble for texting me that question.
Allison will be
No,
taking
no,
us through the next two wines. So
No, you know, at the end of the day, like it doesn't matter. And when I looked at these, when you asked me earlier and I looked at these wines, I just looked at them and I was like, I want to taste Pocket Full of Stones first. And to me it can be a little bit rounder. And so I thought that it would be a little bit more like a better kind of start to things. Like when I looked at like, oh, are we gonna do the Sauvignon Blanc first or the Pocket Full of Stones? When I looked at the Pocket Full of Stones, I salivated.
Mhm.
So that's one we're gonna try first.
Good answer. No.
Very Pavlovian.
See, the questioning people clapped at that. They get it.
Yes.
But
I figured it was
those-
Stacy.
Those wines,
It's always Stacy. She's a troublemaker. Although I've got my eye on
And they-
Jody too. She could be trouble as well. So food pairings with this one. Are we leaning into the same things that salmon? Are we going maybe even something more like chicken or like a whitefish? Where are you headed with this one?
oh, I mean, whitefish would have been fine. Halibut.
Oh, we want more than fine.
But I mean that when you said chicken though, so at my house we eat like my wife was at Costco today, got two the whole chickens.
The rotisserie chickens.
No, not the rotisserie,
Oh.
like the raw chickens.
Okay, yeah.
So we will like if she says, "Hey babe, let's have chicken tomorrow." Then the night before, I'll take one of those chickens and you spatchcock it, you butterfly it,
Yep.
cut out the neck and everything, and then I'll just dry brine it with salt and pepper and maybe some other, whatever your kind of herbs you're into.
I'm a little bit of some rosemary.
Yeah, whatever you like. I like sage,
Mm.
A little butter if you want, but I've gotten to where I just prefer like a dry brine, put it in, leave it uncovered in the fridge overnight, and then the next day throw that guy in the oven, cook it until the meat thermometer says it's good, and it'll crisp up on the skin will crisp up, the herbs, you season it to your liking, and that succulent chicken with that wine, and maybe just like some roasted potatoes, salad. That's
Sounds like a very French meal.
yeah.
What I love about the Sauvignon Blanc is that so often, especially alluding to many of the places that you'd work that Chris mentioned, Sauvignon Blanc is so acid focused and as delicious as it is, doesn't really have the weight of texture. And because of how you're making it, it has that weight of texture that just makes it so enjoyable that you can see why it would work with a dish like chicken and not be all acid hitting the chicken.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yum,
it's
yum.
kind of like the best of New Zealand, obviously. You were in central Otago, so not, Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc. But then it's got the weight of that Sancerre, that heaviness that Sancerres typically have, that richness.
To me, when I started drinking wine, the component in wine that I found most like immediately relatable was texture.
Mhm.
Yep.
So, and like with red wine, obviously you've got, gritty tannins to velvety texture. Well, I want texture in white wine. Texture without it being cloying. And, we've all had that overly ripe, sticky Viognier, or overly buttery, creamy Chardonnay. And I want just enough texture that it feels good on the palate, but that it's not, over the top.
Mhm. Nice. All right, let's move on to the reds. And we are going to start with your 2021 Zinfandel. the oldest wine that you gave us. And this is your non-Santa Barbara County, Santa Maria County entry. This is from Paso Robles for Zinfandel. Take us through your decision making on uh, creating a Paso Robles Zin.
Yeah, so Zinfandel's the OG California grape. I mean, it's 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 California. And here in Santa Barbara County, the oldest vineyards, commercial vineyards, were out on Santa Cruz Island.
Mhm.
And so there's a history of, an old history of winemaking here. And I read a couple books, like these histories and chronicles of Santa Cruz Island, and I don't know, it was just really cool, and reading about the vineyards out there. So I was sharing this with a friend of mine, and she was at the time she was managing a wine bar down in Santa Barbara. And I was telling her, I was like, I want to make Zinfandel. Like I got to do this. And she ended up making the introduction to me to a guy named Jordan Collins. His dad is Neil Collins.
Yep.
And Jordan's family, him and, they manage this vineyard out in Paso.
Yeah.
So my friend introduced me to Jordan, and I bought grapes from, it's like a 1950s planting, I think. Dry farmed, organic, head trained Zinfandel out on the west side of Paso. I mean, it just like checks all the boxes. And years starting in 2016 to 2019, I made wine with some friends of mine from Denmark. And they wanted to make these like really light, like infusion kind of tea-like wines. And so what we found this like formula of de-stemming the grapes, but only leaving them on the skins for 3 to 5 days and then pressing them off. And then letting the wine finish in tank to where you get 80-90% of the color extraction you would have gotten with a full fermentation.
Right.
But you don't get as much tannin, you don't get as much structure. And so you get like the second favorite bottle, most memorable bottle that I would have, aside from the Sanford and Benedict, was a Rosé de Rices, basically a rosé style wine from Champagne, a still wine from Champagne. That was another wine that I've had that was just hyper memorable. So making these wines they're not rosé, but they're not quite red wine.
Yeah.
And so that's how I made this Zinfandel. It's like old school California grape variety, but made for the hipsters. And so it's destemmed, 4 days on the skins, pressed off, finished fermentation, in a tank, and then into barrel for 10 months, and then bottled, unfined, unfiltered.
I think a lot of people have very prejudged visions of what Zinfandel is. And I think this is such a perfect example of the elegance that Zinfandel can and should be, that it's not about this jammy forward, wine, or that it's even all the spice. It's just Zinfandel can be so elegant. And I think you make a perfectly good example of that.
In this same wine, you could pair with those same salmon dishes.
Mm-hmm.
You could pair it with that roast chicken, and it's gonna be maybe not as perfect of a pairing as those white wines, but it'll still do it.
Yeah. No, to me, this has the characteristics of like a cool climate Grenache, like not a Spanish style, but a very light style Grenache, or even like a Barbera. I mean,
Yeah,
maybe not
yeah.
as lush as a Barbera, but with that acid drive, kind of a little bit of a meatier note to it. Yeah, this is one of those, again, like the Pocket Full of Stones, where you put this in front of your, wine friends and ask them to blind taste it. They're not going to know what it is. I think you put this in front of people and you're not going to have a whole lot of people telling you this is Zinfandel. There's just no Zinfandel primary, Somme, medium plus, et cetera, qualities on this to separate it.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely delicious. And for those who aren't familiar with, so Jordan Collins, his father is a gentleman named Neil Collins, who has a winery in Paso Robles called Lone Madrone, but he's also the consulting winemaker for Tablas Creek, and makes a lot of their wines. So very active in the regenerative, organic, certified movement. So always looking for those older vineyards that source these amazing grapes like this one. Is this, I mean, what sort of yields are you getting off of this? Like, because I imagine if planted in the 1950s, there's not, especially on the west side, being cooler, not allowing the grapes to propagate as much as they do in warmer climates on the east side. You're not getting a lot of fruit off of these vines, I imagine.
No, and to facilitate dry farming, you really need to plant at pretty wide spacing.
Right.
So your vines per acre are in the, like, I don't know, 630, 650. If you're at 10 by 10, I think you're at like 600 and something vines per acre, or actually it's less. It'd be 435, right?
Yeah.
So that's not that many vines. And so yeah, I mean that's a whole nother conversation right there. You have people, like, look at a lot of modern plantings, a lot of people, you invest in high dollar amount plantable vineyard land, and you want to get your highest return on investment, and you're going to plant 6 by 3.
Right.
But that's very expensive to install. It's very expensive to farm. Your yields are higher, but what's the net, and what's your constant, like, exposure in that model? And so, like, I'm planning a development at Dimitri, and we're going to plant it 10 by 10 because it's going to be that much more affordable to develop.
Right.
Our yields are not going to be that crazy, but our farming costs on any given year are going to be lower, so our exposure at any given time is lower. So is the and one could art, like, I haven't, it'd be hard to do that perfect math, but the net's probably about the same.
Yeah.
And not that far off, and that fits for the context out there. And I think that was, when you look at, like, old school, like, viticultural philosophy, you had, your vegetables in the lowlands, you have your orchards, and then you have your vineyards, and you got to plant your vineyards at a higher, at lower density to make a bigger plant to go down deep enough to get the water. And so on the west side of Paso, it's a kind of a unique spot in California where there still is a fair amount of those historically developed and that historic model, which is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, although, Zinfandel is one of those that if you think about the west side of Paso, it's, Grenache, Syrah Mourvèdre, it's Cab. Zinfandel is not a grape that people tend to think of from the cooler west side. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's honorable what the owners of this vineyard have done in keeping those Zinfandel vines, finding the folks who are willing to work with something so unique, because there's so much demand for other grapes in that area, that it works nicely.
Well, outside of Paso, where they don't seem to appreciate the cool climate for Zinfandel, up in Dry Creek and other areas where Zinfandel does reign, they do understand that cooler temperatures, because Zinfandel is like Pinot Noir and it's very finicky in many ways. And so putting it in these hot areas and making these jam bombs has ruined Zinfandel. I mean, that's why people think it's a forgotten grape, because nobody wants to drink it, because they don't realize that it can be this elegant, more medium-bodied wine that can go with so many different foods and be.
Damn you, Lodi! Damn you! No.
Well, I don't know about Lodi. I'm only talking about your people in Paso.
Well, it's
no,
true.
I think we have. Years ago, I worked for an importer, and I sold wine, and I think it was Storybook Zin. It was a really good Zin, a little more spice driven, not jammy. And I had Beverly Hills as my territory, and I went into Lowry's Steakhouse. You know, the steakhouse.
Lowry's the prime rib.
Yeah, where the purple-haired ladies come off the bus every day, or blue-haired ladies. And I went into the wine buyer, and I tasted him on the Zin. He tasted, and he argued with me and said, "This is not Zinfandel." And I'm like, no, this is very clearly Zinfandel. And he's like, "No, Zinfandel should be jammy and overripe and whatever." And I'm like, no, this is Zinfandel. This is, you know, what it is. And I think people just have such a wrong idea. And if they can taste more like this, they would understand why it's a beautiful grape and why it's California's grape.
Yeah.
This wine has been, I don't have much of it left, but it has been a bit of a challenge to sell, because a couple of my buyers, like my distributor in New York, for example, they're like, "We love the wine. It's great. Like, we would drink it all day long, but it's not what our clients are looking for when they're looking for a Zin."
Yep.
When they only have 1 or 2 shelf spots or whatever, then, you know, and so it's so crazy. That's one of the challenges of a winemaker, is like, I made this wine because I wanted to drink it. I wanted to taste what Zinfandel tasted like with this particular way of making wine. But, you know, it's it's crazy.
Back when the Italian settlers were, you know, coming to California in 1860, 1870 and planting their Primitivo or Croatian vines, and this is what they were getting from it because of the style of winemaking. I think that's what I was alluding to with, you know, the fact that this vineyard still existing on the west side of Paso is an anomaly, because it's producing grapes that are not traditionally tasting like Zinfandel, so it makes it a much more difficult sell. And unfortunately, in our, you know, commerce-driven wine business these days, it's you know, people don't want to hand sell something fun, something interesting, something unique. It's give me what I know kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm, because of the lightness of this, I'm super interested to hear your food pairings with this particular wine. I have some thoughts in mind, but I'd love to hear what you think.
We eat a lot of
Chicken.
a lot of lamb at my house.
Yeah.
And so lamb burgers, it's like once a week. And
sorry, Mike and Jeannie.
This is lamb burger, cheeseburger all day long.
Nice. Are you putting feta on top of that, or what sort of cheese are you putting on?
Whatever we have, whatever particular. Last night we had lamb burgers with just cheddar. You know, like you know, what can even be really good too is like something like Havarti that's really creamy.
Mm-hmm.
Or feta, like if you want something that's a little bit more pungent.
Yep. Nice. So Cameron is enjoying a smoked marlin queso taco with this. And man, like the minute you said smoked marlin, like I'm thinking of like Montreal smoked meat sandwiches with this. Like for some reason, the acidity, but the cranberry notes on this, like anything with a little bit of smoke, like a brisket or some ribs, I think would be absolutely divine with this particular wine.
Agreed.
I think that's the beauty of it, because the wine has so much elegance and isn't overpowering with the spice that it can stand up to, but really play off of something a little bigger.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the wine, and you mentioned you don't have much of this, so pick this up, because this is the wine to fool your wine snob friends or your sommelier friends with, because they're not going to have any idea that this is an Zinfandel.
You know, when you have the argument, like someone says, "I don't drink Chardonnay," and then you turn them on to that Chardonnay. When someone says, "Oh, I don't drink Zinfandel," this is the one you turn them on to.
Yeah.
Exactly. Perfect. All right, last but not least, since we're getting a little low on time, that's all right. Let's go with our oldest wine, the 2020 Alondra de los Prados Syrah. So this is a very special vineyard, and I know one that you're very closely tied to and have a lot of affinity for.
Yeah, so back in 2010, I worked for a little while at Marjoram Wine Company, and we were the exclusive buyer of the grapes from this vineyard. It's a 1 acre vineyard in San Ynez, back behind the airport. And when I worked there at Marjoram, like whenever we would do a tasting, this was always the bottle that I took home. It was so good. It was just, for whatever reason, it was the most expensive Syrah in his portfolio, and just very, very expressive. And in 2015, just networking with another vineyard manager, I got the ability to take this vineyard over.
Mm.
And so the previous owner, she just couldn't be bothered with it. She wasn't a wine drinker. And so she just let me farm it and keep the grapes. She knew that maintaining the vineyard added value to her property, but she didn't want to spend any money.
Right.
So I provided a good solution to her. And then after a couple of years, she sold the property, and I've maintained a similar deal with the current owners where I give them certain amount of wine for the use of their vines. And it's 1 acre, exactly 1 acre. It's mostly Syrah, a little bit of Grenache, and an unidentifiable white is about 2% of the plants. And it makes every year these really interesting, complex versions of Syrah. It's because it's 1 acre, it really reacts to the growing season.
Yeah.
And then just like other things, like one year when the new owners bought the place, the previous owner had dogs and the new owners didn't. So the squirrels came in.
Oh,
So in 2017, I lost like half the crop to squirrels.
I was gonna say
And
squirrels, deer, there's all sorts of things that could
yeah,
come
and
in
that
that
and that
process.
so that changed the way it ripened that year. So the 2017 was crazy different than 16 and 18 because of, half the crop got consumed. So the physiology of the vines and the chemistry was totally out of whack. So it's, and like I have a couple cases left of that, and it's cool to go back and check on it and taste it. Um and I feel like every year getting, just we've been replanting the vineyard, and it's just a great little vineyard. It's the only vineyard that I still personally farm myself outside of Demetria.
Mhm.
Um and yeah, and so 2020 was just a textbook, no drama vintage. Everything ripened really great. We were able to bring the grapes in at ideal, ripeness levels. For this wine, most years I'm looking to do about 25% stem inclusion or whole clusters. So we'll dump a percentage, about 25% of the bunches just directly into the fermentation bins and then destem on top of it.
Mhm.
And that adds by maintaining those bunches intact, you get a slight carbonic character from those intact bunches, as
Yeah.
well as the infusion of the flavors from the stems. Um, Ferment to dryness, press it to barrel, neutral barrels for, depending on the vintage, 18 to 22 months. I think the earliest I've ever bottled it was like 14 or 16 months right after the following harvest. So, kind of making the wine. This is one of my more classic wines. Like, I'm not, the Zinfandel's a slightly avant-garde, but the Syrah, this is just like no bullshit. If you like a classic, more northern Rhone with a little bit of white pepper, slightly herbaceous, that this is your Syrah.
Interesting. So you're really only using newer oak for your white wines. Your red wines, it sounds like, are all pretty much neutral barrel.
Yeah, I mean, and the whites, it's not even, it's really just like, I mean, I think I bought in the last 3 years since I kind of started that program. I mean, I bought like 3 barrels.
Mm.
So it's not, it's really just like starting to like build up a stable of the acacia barrels.
Right.
And because you can't buy those on the secondary market, like I gotta buy them new.
Yeah.
So like buying one a year, two a year, feathering them in. But yeah, with the reds, I'm I use a little bit of new oak at Demetria, but I haven't really bit that bullet yet for the Roark wines.
Interesting. Um, so there's a question from Stacy about what if you put the Syrah in an acacia barrel? What would happen if you did that?
It would explode.
It's true. It's like nitro and glycerin together. It's
It wouldn't
bad.
work. Oil and water. Um, you know, I the as I mentioned earlier, in my experience, the acacia is a little bit more reductive. It's
Mm,
tighter grained,
yeah.
a little bit more, a little bit less oxygen transmission. I don't rack my wines much. If you guys, I don't know if you're familiar with what that means, but you know, I, in the life cycle of my wines, I take them out of the barrel one time, clean the barrels, and put them back in. That's the same for whites and reds. If you were to do that more, then you can kind of speed up the development and the evolution of the wine. Um, so I kind of want, especially with this Syrah. I mean, this Syrah right now, this is a 2020, and it's going to age for years.
Yeah.
You could decant this wine prior to consuming. So if I were to had I aged that wine in a reductive vessel, it would be further. It would be it would not be as far along and developed as it is now.
It would be younger and tighter.
Yeah, yeah.
Tannins would be a little more robust on it. Yeah, and clearly if you're shooting for more of that Northern Rhone style, which it sounds like you are, you want to, have more of that oxidative side of things.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, what an interesting story behind this vineyard. How I have to ask, how did you sort of broach that conversation or breach that conversation with the new owners? Like, it's always sort of a dicey proposition when a new person comes in and buys your vineyard because you have no idea what they're going to do with it. But it sounds like you've gotten an amazing deal out of this.
Yeah, I mean the current owners, they're awesome. They bought the property because I mean it's about a 5 acre property. It's got some horse facilities, and a nice little home. Um, so they bought it for that, mate. And it just happened to have a vineyard as a part of the landscaping. And they like wine, but they weren't interested in getting involved in the wine business per se or anything like that. And they knew that I was tending it, and we talked about it. And I like I for if I was a vineyard manager and they wanted me to hire me to manage that property, it would be astronomical.
Right.
Just like for not me being like super greedy
No, but
or
just for 1 acre and
yeah,
under.
just like for me to like minimum charge to put it on my radar, it's going to be X dollars, and that would be, and there's plenty of people, if you own a multi-million-dollar, horse property with a vineyard on it, then like that amount of money could be nominal. But that's where it's like, hey, I'll do it. I'll give you 10 cases of wine, and you don't have to do anything, and you're not out of pocket anything. And that's worked. They're happy. They get wine made from their vineyard. And then I take care of it, and because I like to do it, and I like the vineyard. I like the wine that's made from there. I have a client that I make a little bit of wine for, and I've been selling him the last couple of years, some of the crop as well. So it's cool to to like make wine from the same vineyard. I make wine from the same vineyard for two different kind of brands. So
And you
that's,
make a little money on the side that they
yeah,
don't.
well, I mean,
Nice.
it's, yeah, and then it's also like a wine, a cool exercise in winemaking, you know? So it's great. And so it's been, yeah, it's been a real pleasure. This last harvest was 10 years making wine from that same vineyard.
Oh,
You've really seen it evolve and
Yeah.
seen how the vines age.
Well,
yeah.
and see, you know, how the wines change and everything, but also how I change.
Right.
Mhm.
You know, like there's a lot of you know, like I I I I think about the way I make that wine now differently than I did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Um and you know that it's all to any consumer person's interpretation on good or bad, but yeah, I know I do it differently than I did, and if
Well, yeah, you have a better understanding of those vines, that particular vineyard. You know it much better. But at the same time, not tied to the Syrah, but all your other wines, you've evolved your winemaking processes in terms of being able to experiment, try different things, different timing, different yeasts, whatever it might be. So yeah, there's definitely an evolution that happens there, I imagine.
yeah, that's what makes it fun, you know.
Nice.
How many different vineyards are you farming at this time? There's Demetria and this one. Any others?
No, not right now, you know. And before I took over Demetria in 2019, and in 2018 I had five. And when I took over farming Demetria, then I kind of like chipped away at those over about 2 years. And um yeah, so I'm always open to new opportunities. I'm always, like every now and then, I have conversations. But when I was a little bit younger, and I said yes to everything, and now I say no to everything.
Except for Costco chicken that's been spatchcocked and
Yeah.
dry brined.
He didn't say no to us to do this. So
No,
No.
it's true.
Oh,
He did say no to the Festival of Forgotten Grapes, though, but that's only because of Chenin Blanc and Malbec. So,
yeah. But yeah,
but
it's
but how many acres is Demetria?
it's 45.
I mean that's a hefty
yeah,
responsibility.
that's a big responsibility.
It's a big
How many different
responsibility, and
varietals?
it's a lot of fun. And 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 I'm responsible for the farming and the winemaking there. So between the two of those things, um,
That's a full-time job.
yeah, it's a full-time job, and making my own wine and a couple small clients that I work with. It's a nice, you know, matrix at the moment. And I've been had other offers. I see other opportunities, and I'm not saying that there's never going to be something else that can't wiggle its way into the system, but it has to work, and it's not like I'm not out chasing it. If it's right, it'll show up and it'll happen. And
Yeah.
I'm at peace
Ryan,
with that.
I'm a little. I come up to Demetria at least once a year to do the Slow Wine Guide updates, and I've noticed something that you don't really fit the Demetria look. Are you like the only man without a man bun?
Well, that's funny you say that, because two 2 months ago my hair was down to here.
Okay. Is it not true that like every man that works there has a man bun?
Well, if they don't have a man bun, they have a substantial beard.
Yes, that's
They
true.
put like a goatee, I imagine,
Yeah,
like a pretty narrow sort of, yeah.
It's really fun to go to Demetria. You've just never seen so many men working in a tasting room that are all tall and like man buns and facial hair walking around. It's not what you see in most wineries.
No, but it's you know Demetria is a truly unique place. Um and when I started out there managing the vineyard, and then 2021 taking over the winemaking, they were kind of in a getting just good enough kind of model. And we've myself and my coworker Emily, who is equally responsible for a lot of the improvements that have been made. You know, the two of us, we've done a lot of work out there, um and I think that the wines show it. The wines are best in class. The farming, you know, we're constantly tweaking that, but it's you know, it's a legitimate wine estate. And I'm very proud and fortunate to be kind of the one that's directing that movement of the farming to the grapes into the cellar into the bottle. And that's something that I think is I think I'm a better winemaker because I know how to farm, and I know how to walk into a vineyard and know if someone else was farming or not.
Yeah.
And um and so, you know, I'm not the best vineyard manager and I'm not the best winemaker, but I think the synergy of those two balances out those weaknesses I have in the other sides of the game. And so, you know, to to be able to do that and to be enabled to do that at a place like Demetria is a pretty special opportunity.
Yeah. Although I think I'm going to ask you to put together a little pocket guide as to when I walk into a vineyard, exactly what I should be looking for and what I should not be looking for, because I
Yeah.
feel like just, you know, for me as a buyer, that's important, but even just like consumers, that would be a fun thing for
You want
Yeah.
to
folks
see
to
you want
have.
to see green under. You don't want to see no weeds under your vines, because that means they use herbicides.
Well, you're not the expert, Allison. Let's leave it for
Yeah,
Ryan, the expert. So, um, but
everyone knows.
I would be remiss before we finish up here to not ask you about your labels, because I know when you first started, when I had your wines in my shop, your labels were basically very similar to your back labels. You had the wooden press, kind of monoblock, like very simple colors on it, but you've evolved over then, and you have these beautiful, colorful labels. Where did they come from?
Um, so my wife is an artist, and we actually started in 2018 with that first pocket full of stones that we made.
Mhm.
And I explained to her kind of, you know, what I was after, and she did a similar label to the pocket full of stones. And it was and the front label at that time had the artwork with the press on the front and some text on the front.
Oh, that sounds very busy.
It was a little busy. You know, it was nice, but it was a little busy, and we ultimately decided that we just want on the front an image that's kind of like my wife, she doesn't drink wine anymore.
Mm.
So now it's just like me explaining to her, like this is what this wine tastes like. These are the colors that I want you to include.
That's super fun.
These are the colors. The Sauvignon Blanc, um, that one, that was a printing mishap, but it worked out fine.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the pocket full of stones, that's watercolors. The Sauvignon Blanc, that is this Japanese marbling that she enjoys doing. Um, the Zinfandel was just her taking some things, creating some pigments, and then playing around. And often I'll come home and she'll just have like 4 or 5 things on the table, and I'm like, that's it, that's it. The the Syrah label is actually that's a photograph.
Yes.
And so I like doing a little bit of photography, and I really like multiple exposures.
Hmm.
So you use film and you expose that film multiple times.
Right.
So you're layering images on top of one another. And so if you look in there, you can kind of see to the right the Prados.
Yep.
So it's very beautifully painted on the gate of that property, Alondra de los Prados. And so that's a multi exposure image of the vineyard and the gate.
Wow. Do you have a dark room basically that you do the
No,
multi?
no,
Oh,
no. So you shoot the black and white, and then I send it to a lab in LA.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
Got it. We
They're
have a
very
question.
eye-catching labels. They're really just,
Yeah.
they really grab you. They're visual and they're colorful, and
They're great, and they don't violate the rule of sales, which is, like artwork that's too out there will alienate half your customer base. Having male or female images will alienate. Like they're sort of neutral enough but beautiful enough that they definitely appeal to a wide variety of folks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
and then all the information needs on the back, so it's not like it's lacking content.
Yeah. And it kind of harkens back again to your original bottlings, because you've got that your basket press, your kind of simple logo that you've had since the beginning. Although you used to have the kind of the RWC, like
Yeah.
the quad split and whatnot, but the basket press was definitely a primary image on your labels.
Yeah.
Nice. We did have a question, which is, where and how did you meet your wife? Fascinating mix of a winemaker and an artist. Perfect pairing, somebody says.
Yeah. So back in 2009, I was working for the Vineyard Management Company, and I had a seasonal job, and so I was gonna be leaving. My job was gonna end in November, and then I had the same job that I could come back to in April. So I decided to go on a trip, and so I in those whatever 3-4 months. So on my days off, I was working at a wine bar in Solvang. And so my wife, she came into the wine bar one night, and you live up in the San Ynez Valley. It's not, the dating pool is quite
Shallow dating
shallow.
pool.
So you have to, you want to find a good partner, you have to import them. And so she had come in, and quite beautiful and charming. And so I, got her information and ended up asking her out. She lived in Orange County at the time. And so we dated long distance for about a year. And then she ended up moving up to the San Ynez Valley. And I think, yeah, like 2011, something like that.
Nice.
And
She's still doing art, obviously, for your labels, but is she kind of doing it
yeah,
recreationally, professionally?
yeah, we live here in Orchid. You came by my house, and
Yep.
we have a little boy who's 8, almost 9 years old, and so we homeschool him, and so that's Jen's primary kind of responsibility and thing. And so I guess our son is her biggest art project at the time.
Her son is your De los Prados, basically.
Yeah, yeah, and but she's still, like in the bedroom and the living room, we have these massive canvases that she repurposed with like fabric and things like that. And so she's not, necessarily like a commercial or, artist, but that's who she is at her core. And and it infuses itself and into our life on all kinds of ways throughout the day, the year, all those things.
I mean, I'm just saying that a wine tasting room slash art gallery would be a perfect combo of a business.
I agree.
So before we finish up, wine pairing with this one, since you mentioned lamb with the Zinfandel, you often hear lamb and Syrah together, but what would you pair with this particular Syrah?
I would go with something like flank steak.
Mm.
And I like a lot of Asian like flavorings and stuff. So a lot of times when I eat steak, I'll marinate it in like with like ginger and like maybe toasted sesame oil
Okay.
and like a little soy sauce, something like
Yeah.
that. that wine could definitely stand up to a fattier cut,
Yeah.
but I prefer the leaner cuts, but then adding in like that umami and kind of fatty with like the toasted sesame.
Yeah.
So something like that. But also, if you were to, we eat a lot of meat. I'm from Texas. But I
You're from Texas, your wife's from Orange County. It makes
yeah, but at work, I cook lunch at work like 3 days a week, and one of my coworkers is vegetarian, so I cook a lot of vegetarian meals, and I think something like this could also go really well with like a really cheesy like risotto.
mm,
Like
yeah,
a mushroom risotto with like, with a lot of, like kind of soft cheese in there.
a nuttier cheese
Yeah.
like a Gruyere or a Emmental or something like that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can see that. Absolutely. Very nice. Um, I also have to ask, since the Syrah is 2020, I know for a lot of wine regions, including in parts of Santa Barbara, smoke taint was a big issue. That was a big year with fires, both in Sonoma and Montecito, Salinas. So, how did this vineyard kind of escape the issue of smoke taint, or was that something that you've seen with the 20s in Santa Barbara, that there just wasn't much smoke issue?
I've not dealt with smoke issues until 2024.
Okay.
And there've definitely been fires over the years. Like I don't even remember fires back in 2020. I mean, I know like Northern California, it's a whole different ball game, but it really hit us in Santa Barbara County in 2024.
Mm,
Demetria, Zacamesa, Fess Parker, the lake fire that started in
right.
July of 20 last July.
Yeah.
That impacted Santa Barbara County. But other than that, I have not had a vineyard that has been affected until then.
Until last year. Nice.
Yeah.
Interesting. One last question. Since Texas is growing in the wine business, has anyone tried to get you to go back and work for them there?
No, no one's I think all my sister lives in Tennessee. My mom, my dad, my brother, they're all in Texas. My wife's family's in Arizona. Um, we we toy with the idea of moving all the time, internationally, nationally, but like every time we just stop and we look back, we look at each other and we're like, where would we go? That, like I don't want to go there because there's bugs. I don't want to go there because it's humid. It's too cold there. We live in Santa Maria. It's beautiful here. We have, my son and I are going camping this weekend. We have the whole Los Padres National Forest is right there. We have the ocean right there. We have, I mean, where is it better than this?
Yeah.
It's
You've got a dog cardiologist right down the street. Boom.
right.
But it's surprising that nobody from Hill Country is like, come, look how good we make wine in Hill Country.
Yeah. No, and I mean it's who knows? Who knows? But
To be fair, Hill Country is UT people, and he's clearly A&M. So,
yeah, I can get along. I was an outlier at A&M.
Yeah, but I don't know that good wine comes from anywhere outside of Hill Country in Texas.
Well, the dirty secret is that all the Hill Country grapes are either from California or they're up in Lubbock in the Panhandle. So,
Yeah. And a couple of years ago we were on my family and I, we make like a big road trip every year. We love it. It's so much fun. And that's about 3 years ago. Because I wanted to see. I've been to Amarillo, Lubbock, all those places.
yeah.
But I wanted to go there as a viticulturalist, and man, it's like, yeah, it works, but it's boring.
Well, to bring it back full circle, when you walked into those vineyards, what did you see that, you know, told you it was a good or a bad vineyard?
Well, you see that, like, okay, yeah, these are people that know how to grow grapes. They're farming grapes. They're doing a great job. It's you know, it's clean, but it's just like it's old cotton growing ground. It's flat, it's dry. So there's, you know, there's no disease pressure. It's easy to farm, but basically back in the 70s and 80s, there were a few enterprising families that said, let's diversify a little bit, and that's why it's there. It's not, you know, it's one of the only places, like, you really think about where there's you know, a viticultural culture, you know, a grape growing culture that's in kind of a shitty looking place.
No elevation means no diversity. Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
no suffering. You want those vines to suffer, and other than the heat, it sounds like there's not much there for them to really put those vines under stress.
that's
No.
why Tempranillo is thriving there.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, they love their Tempranillo and Cabernet. They're just, you know, shining.
That's true. Cool. So, to kind of wrap things up, if folks are coming up to Santa Barbara, coming up to San Ynez, want to meet up with you, do a tasting, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you? Is there a way for them to taste? What's, you know, where can they buy additional bottles?
Yeah. You know, obviously you can buy additional bottles on my website.
Yep.
That, you know, that works. If you're coming up, you know, anybody that's here tonight, like, I don't do a lot of private tastings. You know, because I make my wine out at Demetria and not trying to shit where I eat kind of thing. But anybody that references this tasting, this experience, I'd be happy to make an exception for that. Come on, you know, send me an email through the website. It'll go to myself or Emily. We'll get back to you. Do anything we can to host you. If it's, yeah. And so, yeah, I'm happy to do those things. I encourage people to come and visit Demetria. It's a great place. And even if, you know, and you can always ask for me. And if I'm around, I'll be happy to give you a couple moments and show you around the cellar a little bit. But if you schedule anything in advance and you reference this, this tasting, then, like, I'd be more than happy um, yeah, do whatever, make you happy, show you around. It's all good.
And
Fantastic.
Demetria is definitely worth visiting. You get there and then you have a mile up the hill to get to this property, and it sits up on a hill, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place.
Nice. So, Ryan, what other wines are you producing? What other varietals are you working with?
Like, right now, this is about it. I skipped the 2024 vintage, but in the last couple years, I've been making, I buy the grapes from Demetria. I do a Grenache Blanc Marsanne blend that's skin fermented, so, you know, little orange wine for the youngsters. And I mean, I've made Pinot Noir in the past. You know, now
We
it's just,
referenced your Malbec and Chenin back in the day.
yeah, those are great. You know, so, like, we'll see. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just, at this point, I don't have to make RO-ark wine to make a living anymore.
Mhm.
So it's whatever, you know, if you know, as my inventory gets a little low, I make a little bit more wine. And seeing, like, the Zinfandel, that just, like, naturally, conversation with a friend. Next thing you know, you're talking to Jordan Collins and you're making Zinfandel. Those are the kind of experiences that I'm looking for my own brand now. Just, like, authentic experiences in wine, hanging out with friends, trying things out, having fun.
Yeah.
What's your total case production currently?
I think in 2024, I did about 800.
Okay.
And
But
it's
you
all
mentioned you go
all
ahead.
DTC, all direct to consumer.
No, it's honestly, it's mostly wholesale.
Oh,
Yep.
Yeah.
Interesting. And what states are you wholesaling in?
California, New York, and until politics got all messy, I was selling a fair amount of wine in Denmark and Japan.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Sorry about the tariffs.
yeah, no, it's so I mean, who knows? Like,
at
yeah,
least you weren't in Canada.
yeah, I used to sell a little bit in Canada, but
I don't know.
um,
Denmark owns Greenland, so that's gonna
yeah,
be a whole issue.
Yeah.
yeah.
So do you have anything in barrel that you're going to be releasing in the future that's, unique or we want to share? Or are there any particular grapes or varietals that you're interested in using moving forward?
There's I made some Merlot in 2023.
Hmm.
And so I'll be releasing that. I'll probably bottle that this summer. I started making Merlot in 2014. And once again, like every other year or so kind of thing. Um, and I got some Merlot again in 2023. And so I was tasting that yesterday actually, and I'm thinking like it'd be good to bottle this summer. And once again, I mean, it's like I I always ask myself why I do these things. Like it's going to take me 3 years to sell it, 100 cases of
Yeah,
Merlot,
you're,
but
you're not in the best location for Merlot, thanks to Sideways.
yeah, I know, but it's once again, it's a vineyard that was planted in 1960
Mm,
off of Refugio Road in San Ynez. It's just like it's perfect soil, perfect, um, you know, kind of location in the valley, old vines, and it just makes. I've made wine from there I think 3 times now, and it's just so good. And and it's like that's what I want to drink. That's what I want to drink with my ribeye is a bottle of, old school Santa Barbara County Merlot.
yeah. Will you ever make another Malbec again?
I don't know, Malbec. It's we'll see. There's so little of it planted.
Yeah.
It's hard to get a hold of. I got a hold of it because I was working for the Vineyard Management Company, so I got the inside scoop on all the available things. Um, so I don't know. We'll see.
Very nice. Well, we appreciate you joining us tonight, and I know we've gone quite a bit long, but if you don't mind sticking around, if anybody has any questions for Ryan, if you want to unmute yourself and ask, this would be a good time to do so. Oh, I think we've got a few. Looks like Pam's going to.
So I've I'm very intrigued. The Zinfandel was like mind blowing. Like I have had a ton of wine and Zinfandel, and literally like you expanded my knowledge because when I first tasted the Zinfandel, I first thought like, okay, Grenache, like you said, like maybe a Grenache, maybe a like no one is ever gonna guess that Zinfandel, which it's incredible, like very delicious and so balanced and tricky, and didn't even know that that grape could do that. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's really
Yeah, that
nice.
was really intriguing. Same with the Syrah, like but the Zin was because everybody again, like Allison was saying earlier, like oh, a Zin is jammy, it's heavy, it's high alcohol, and poured it in the glass. Looked very light, really unique. Kind of this is not what I was expecting. Like nice, smell, aroma, and then the alcohol content same. Like that you can balance that because again, jammy, heavy, like ugh. Haven't drank a Zinfandel in quite a while, but because we all like Americans and Californians know like this is the Zin. Here's your it's a cab, it's a Merlot, it's a Zin, like, but
It's not a
this was
melted Tootsie Roll in a
really,
glass, basically.
yeah, yeah, it really incredible what you were able to do with it, and thank you so much. It was fantastic.
No, thank you. Those are really, really kind words. I really appreciate it.
I had last night. I poured in a little bit of the Sauvignon Blanc to figure it out, and I got a wine group, and we taste blind every week on a theme, and every once in a while, I and some other people will bring one bottle, we'll ask for another brown paper bag and put a big question mark on it so that we can like test our. I mean, we got a couple Psalms in the group, and so it's always nice to screw with them and see if you have something that you think are like, well, anytime I try something and just go, you know what? If I tasted this blind, you know what I think? And it's funny that I didn't know about your background, but I was tasting this one. I thought, you know what? If I tasted this blind, I might think it's a Shannon. It really had that quality. It has much more of a very, it doesn't have the grassiness. It doesn't have the tropical fruit. It has that sort of round, stone fruity Loire taste to it. So it was really interesting. And also the expressions that Shannon tends to have in California. So I think I may see you if you're at Forgotten Grapes and maybe pick up a bottle or two so I can put it in a brown bag with a question mark.
Yeah.
It won't be there, but you can definitely pick up more bottles of that wine, and we can get it to you. Awesome. Anyone else?
I think Pam wants to unmute.
Yeah, Pam seems champing at the bit. You need to unmute yourself, Pam. Let me see if I can do that. No, you're muted, Pam. You have to unmute yourself. Still muted. Keep going. It looks like a little microphone on the bottom left with a red slash through it.
Thank you very much, Chris.
I have a question while we wait for Pam.
Jody,
I'm dying to
perfect.
know what Pam has. Like,
It's
I'm dying.
it's our Ventura crowd. Yes.
Oh, is Pam Ventura?
She is. Yes.
Oh, I'm Ventura too, Pam.
She's over in like Satakoy area.
Oh, I know. Okay. My question was, when we started in the order, and because I knew I couldn't try all four, I started with the Chenin Blanc. I mean, the Sauvignon Blanc. And I would have done the Chardonnay one next. And then I would have done the Syrah and the Zin. So I was surprised by the order. So I'm off what everyone else tried, is what I'm saying. So were there notes before I was supposed to read?
No, we mentioned it at the beginning of the tasting that we were going to go through the Pocket Full of Stones, then the Sauvignon Blanc, then the Zin, then the Syrah.
Actually, I'm not sure if we said it. You and I said it, but I know you said we're going to start with Pocket Full of Stones. I'm not sure if
I'd already opened mine, and I thought it would go like
Jody,
this.
don't open until we tell you. That's
next time.
rules.
But I started before the thing started because I was so afraid I wouldn't
Listen
get in
to the experts. We know what we're doing.
Okay, next time I'll wait because I was all like, what?
You're not ready
Why
yet.
are you starting over here?
Don't take things into your own hands.
Okay, next time I won't. But I also would not have guessed that that was a Sauvignon Blanc. I would not have guessed that myself.
I think we're discovering the thing about the Roark Wine Company is that whatever the varietal name is on the bottle is not what you think it's going to be when you actually taste it.
That's okay with me. And I thought it was maybe the acacia.
Yeah, that has a big impact on it for sure.
Okay, that's it for me.
I had lunch today with a winemaker friend from Napa, Julie Johnson from Tres Sabores, who had a Zinfandel, who is also in this style. And I went with her after lunch over to a little shop and went through the same thing where the buyer was like tasting it and is like, he was in love with the Zinfandel, but the same thing. He made his big generalizations about
I love it. This is beautiful. This is wonderful. I can't sell it. I can't buy it.
Well,
so do you have anything to say?
That's kind of what he said, but also because he's like, all my clients lost their houses in the fire. So that was his excuse. But he loved the Zinfandel. But it was interesting because not only did he love it because it was a very similar, elegant, beautiful expression, but he made a blanket statement about he loved her rosé of Zinfandel. It's not a white Zin, but loved her rosé. And then made a comment like, well, there are no good rosés. And we had the conversation there because I said there is one
That's
definitive.
like catnip to Allison.
No. the only catnip to me is that there's one ultimatum, one definitive statement that you can make in wine, which is that there are no definitive statements. Because
I agree.
it's just the only thing I can say across the board is that you can't make this, because there will always be something that changes your mind because of either the winemaker's choice, the region, or maybe just we've had some really bad Zinfandels out there and we just forgot what the grape can do. And the same thing, Sauvignon Blanc, it's not all one linear style. There's diversity. So I think that's the great thing about wine, is being surprised, but also being so open to it, to know that it's just always a surprise what you're going to get.
Like a box of chocolates, Forrest?
Yeah.
Exactly. No, I mean, you wouldn't, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you should taste a Zinfandel and it should taste like Sauvignon Blanc. I mean, there's a frame of reference of what grapes and wine should taste like, but it's really nice to see that not everything is so, singular in its description that, that would make it really boring to taste wine.
I mean, what makes the wine world exciting is winemakers like Ryan, who are making wine in their vision with their style, whether it fits into, tidy little boxes or not. You're doing what you are doing and you're finding an audience for it. And that's the most important thing, is if you create wines in a style that are true to your nature, true to the, makeup of the grape, you're going to find people who will appreciate that. And that's the most important thing. Pam, did you have anything to say before we were, oh, there she go.
We did. We keep trying to hit unmute, but it keeps saying sharing is not turned on. I don't know.
Well, that's not the unmute button then. So now
No,
you can
I know, and it says host wants you to unmute. Both of us keep hitting. I don't know what's going on. I don't know.
You're unmuted
Gotcha now. So speak now, quickly.
Oh, you can hear?
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
That's why I'm talking with you. The fact that I'm talking with you means I can hear what
You'll
you're
have to
saying.
excuse us. We thought it was AI speaking to us.
No, I get that. I get the AI thing a lot.
I just wanted to compliment Ryan about the Zin. I'm picking up on what the lady said before.
Yes.
Last century, when we first started drinking wine seriously, we were drinking a wine called Cresta Blanca Zinfandel, and it was like 12.5%. And we continued to drink Zinfandel because we liked the grape, but it started going up like the stock market till it was almost like drinking port. So to find a wine like
16.5,
this,
17.5.
It's just the essence of the grape. It's wonderful because I hate to show my age, but I can't drink those heavy hitters anymore.
You're not alone in that. It has nothing to do with your age.
Agreed. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And the first wine, the Pocket Full of Stones, that's a wine I would drink all by itself, and there are very few wines I can say that about. Usually I want to have, even if it's just cheese and crackers, I want to have something just to take the edge off, whatever it is. The first sip I took of that was wonderful, and it just, I could have just drunk it just as it is, and I will continue to do so.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you so much.
And I have to sing it. I've got a pocket full of stones. Dun, 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 dun. Damn you, Ryan.
Got it, Chris.
That one.
I love Natasha Bedingfield. God damn it. All right. Beautiful. Wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody. I think this is probably a good place to let Ryan get back to his family and his potential lamb burgers or whatever. I don't know if you've opened tonight, but whatever you're going to have for dinner.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. It's
all right. We appreciate it.
Really
we will
appreciate
see
it.
everybody in May. We've got Outward Wines from Santa Barbara, who is going to be our featured winery of the month then. So keep an eye out for that email, which will come out in the second half, probably in the last couple of weeks of April. But before then, we hope to see all of you at the Festival of Forgotten Grapes on March 29th at Mica, Los Angeles on Mission Road. And we will see you then.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Ryan.
everybody.
Thank you,
Take
Ryan.
care. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Bye now.